All right. Good afternoon. Welcome. Let's get started for today. I know we've got a lot of folks who are joining us through Zoom, so welcome. Glad to have you here. Before we get started on the new stuff for today, I just want to give just a few updates and things to know related to the course. So first of all, you should see your grades up for your reflection assignment. That's out of 150 points, so those should be up. Unfortunately, Canvas has had some outages and issues with saving materials, so it's been kind of a mess because I submitted comments and a lot of them did not actually get uploaded to Canvas. So I've been having to go in and manually rewrite a lot of your comments. So I'm in the process of doing that. If you didn't see your comments up, then you should see them by the end of the day. I'm just trying to work through all the classes and make sure that I have the comments re-uploaded for everybody. So you should see your grades up and you should see your comments up very shortly if you haven't already. That's regarding that reflection assignment. If you have questions about the grade that you've got or confused about the grade that you've got and want to talk about it anymore, let me know. I'm happy to do so. Another thing to know is spring registration, of course, is open. Spring classes are available. I definitely recommend getting in touch with your advisor, filling out that schedule for you in the spring. If you're a comm major or minor, Professor Kevin Roy, the chair of comm, just sent out information about some of the capstone courses that are available. So if you're a senior or you're thinking about going forward, how to register for your classes, that's coming up too. And then I also wanted to remind you that because you have your next writing assignment coming up by the end of the week, you can still send me your rough drafts or outlines. If you do so by the end of the day on Friday, then I'm happy to give you feedback, let you know what to work on going forward. So just a few updates and housekeeping details as we get started for today. I know that thankfully, COVID cases have been going down, and there's been discussion at the state level about reducing some of the COVID restrictions. We are going to continue to just do what we need to do and we're required to do through the university for now. If things change in terms of policy with COVID, the university or state, then we'll have that information work from there. So for the time being, I appreciate those of you that are not able to come to class or under quarantine going through Zoom, and folks continuing to do what we need to do to stay safe. So that being said, let's go ahead and get started for today. So those of you that have had a class with me before might be familiar with this practice. So around the middle of every class, since we're around the 6th week or so, we're right around the middle of the quarter. What I like to do is to give you the opportunity to do an anonymous feedback form. So that anonymous feedback form is available on Canvas. So if you have a device with you, such as a phone or laptop, you're welcome to pull that up. So if you go to Canvas, in the Canvas page for this course, you'll notice on the very top of the front page, there's this anonymous feedback form right here. Click on that, and it's just a few different fields to fill out for this course in terms of just some questions about course structure, 2 things that are going well, and 2 things that can change. This form is completely anonymous. If you do not have access to a phone or device that you can use to access this form, that's completely okay. You're also welcome to handwrite without your name, just a note about a couple things that are going well and a couple things that could be done to change the course. You complete evals at the end of every term, which is designed to talk about the course and how it went. Those aren't as helpful to you, right? I like to do this now just to know what I can continue to do and what I can change or modify at this stage so that it can directly help you. Especially with COVID and where we're at in the quarter and the new year and all the chaos and challenges that's been going on, it's really important to me that you are supported and able to successfully work through everything in this class. So I'll give you some time to work on that. Give you a couple minutes to continue working on this. And if you're not able to complete it today, as long as you get it in by Friday, that's just fine. All right. Looks like most folks here are done. And if you're working remotely, again, you can continue to have that tab open or submit it later if you're not yet done. thank you for taking the time to do that. I appreciate you working through it, and I will look through the feedback and then on Friday let you know some of the adjustments and changes based on that feedback. So thanks for taking that. So just as a recap, this week we've been talking about meetings. Group meetings alone aren't super exciting. Talking about group meetings, I know, is not the most exciting thing either. But I do think that talking about how groups meet and how to make the meetings that members of your group have more effective and useful really saves you a lot of time and energy in the long run. I think it's a really useful skill. So we talked a little bit about that last class, about when it's a good idea to have a good group meeting and when, as folks like JP brought up, it should be an email instead. And then also some of the ways that we can hold a good group meeting as well. Just as a quick reminder, again, the small group assessment is due by the end of the day on Sunday. Again, it's drawing from those activities we've been doing in class. Just have that on your radar. I'm gonna just keep doing that reminder. So last class, we talked about the idea, right, that when a group meets, the point of a group is not that it has meetings, it doesn't have meetings for the sake of it, but that a meeting is a means to an end, that a meeting allows groups to work together and achieve their goals on issues. There's two situations in which groups doing meetings are useful. First of all, if a group's got to reach a decision, if they have to decide who to hire for a job, like doing a meeting is a way to get that action item resolved. And secondarily, the idea of synergy. You work together, you brainstorm, you figure out how to host this awesome birthday party, right? You come up with ideas that are more than what you would come up with on your own. So these are most likely the two situations in which you would want to hold some type of meeting. We also talked last class about some of the ways to prepare for meetings. I'm not going to go over all of these. Just as a reminder, right, being able to come in on time rather than rushing there at the last minute, taking the time to really listen to and understand people's points of view and perspectives can be really useful, right? Because one of the worst habits of a group meeting is when everybody just says what the previous person said over and over and wastes everybody's time. So taking the opportunity to really listen and try to understand each other will help a lot. When it comes to hosting, one thing that I really recommend, again, is the idea of an agenda, right, or some written guidelines that are sent out in advance. That way, members of the group know what to expect. You've got a plan for how to do your meeting. Again, one model that really works is early, asking people to send agenda items, and then maybe a few days before the meeting, setting out the agenda, letting people know what to expect. You might even include things like URLs or links to or attachments to some of the things that you're going to reference in the meeting. For instance, maybe you're part of a group and your group has something like a spreadsheet that goes over your finances. Sending that in advance of the meeting is a great way to get people prepared, ready to go, and easily be able to access that material during the meeting. So we talked a little bit about some of the ways to hold meetings effectively. What I want to do for this class is to talk about some of the ways that we can facilitate the meetings, right? Including what it means for a meeting to be facilitated poorly and to have gone badly, and some of the ways that meetings can be retooled to be more effective. So we'll be spending a lot of time today going over some tips and general strategies about how to hold a good and ideal meeting. And then we'll be doing an activity where I'm asking you to think about your own example of a situation in which you could use these skills to create a good meeting. So when it comes to having a good meeting, I think a really good way to think about this is kind of like a pie chart, right? And this pie chart is pretty equally divided into three different parts. When it comes to having your group work well, again, this could be extracurricular, this could be a professional group, this could be a group of friends, this could be a study group. There's a lot of different ways that you can make things go smoothly. First step is prep, right? Prep could be something like sending out an agenda, developing a plan, creating a set of guidelines, something like preparing or creating a good listenable space or digital environment, sending out a Zoom link well in advance if you're holding a meeting through Zoom. That early prep stage is a really important opportunity to help that meeting go smoothly. Secondarily, running the meeting. Obviously, giving people the chance to speak, monitoring time, making things go well during the meeting is really important. And then I think lastly, and probably the least thought about part of the meeting, is the idea of having good follow-up, right? And good follow-up for a meeting can mean a few different things. One of them is the idea of using minutes, right? One strategy that works really well is to have a person in your group who is in charge of taking minutes or notes on the meeting, and then sending out those notes shortly after the meeting is ended. If you're hosting a meeting and it's through something like Zoom or FaceTime or something similar, have that meeting be recorded, and then after the meeting, send the link. You can also send a quick recap of the meeting and say, today we were able to talk about these topics and reached a solution on this, right? That's a really good way to make sure that people remember what you talked about. Another important component that you can use meeting follow-up for is just to reiterate tasks or responsibilities that members of your group did. So maybe your group is working together and you're going to be doing like a movie watching party. The Oscar nominations are out and you've decided that you all are going to do a party where you screen some of the movies that are nominated. Maybe you have a member of your group that needs to put together a poster so that you can distribute this watching party. So you might use meeting follow-up to say, we've assigned this person to go make a poster. So meeting follow-up is a great way to help to prepare for the next meeting and to make sure people take away the things that they need to know from that meeting too. So there's a lot of different things that can be signs of meetings that are going poorly and meetings not being facilitated very well. And I want to go over some examples and ways of thinking about these strategies, some of the ways that we can avoid them to make our meetings go well. One of the biggest issues is a disagreement or argument about established facts. We've seen this as kind of a big point of discussion over the last several years, right, where a lot of people will get their sources or information from a lot of different places. There's a lot of questions about the validity of the information we've received. Does it come from a credible source? A lot of concerns, right, about fraudulent, incorrect facts and so on. So that can be a problem when we're in a group, where not everybody is in agreement about facts or things that are just true. So one important thing you can do to create a good group is early on, really create the established facts and boundaries of people. So for instance, maybe you create a spreadsheet that shows the expenses and profits and you say, look, our restaurant's profits went down by 25% this last quarter. And that is an established fact. It went down. So if somebody tries to claim that they made more money, that's not the case. You're doing something fun, like you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, right? You might establish early on when a character is dead, they're dead. There's no reincarnation, right? It's an established fact and a boundary that you're creating. Opinions introduced as truth is an important one. So I recommend, if you haven't already, to consider taking a class in writing and rhetoric. Argumentative writing in particular is a great way to get into some of these issues, such as logical fallacies, right? Or arguments gone wrong. So an opinion, right, is maybe your own perspective and your idea on an issue. And that's different than an established fact, obviously. But there are a lot of ways that we will try to convert opinions into fact or to think about things that feel right or feel true to us in a generalizable way that doesn't work. In fact, this is called a hasty G or hasty generalization, kind of a silly name. For example, maybe you're working at a restaurant and you say, you know what, I was working at the cashier the other day, and there were tons of people, like everybody was coming. It was a really popular day. And so you say, as a result of that, no, our profits are going up, we're making a ton of money, even though maybe it was a super busy or popular day, and overall, your profits have gone down, right? Your opinion from that day that things have gone up does not translate into facts. So it's important to think about and double check your opinions on these issues. Make sure that they apply, connect well to the facts that you're given. Intimidation with knowledge is a challenge because it oftentimes means that somebody comes in with experience and uses their experience or knowledge on a topic as a tactic of silencing other voices. For instance, say you were to join something like a team or extracurricular activity, and you're, on the volleyball team, but you're in your first year at EOU, you're brand new. And then you have a senior on the team that says, look, I've been here a lot longer than you. I'm a senior, so you need to just shut up and listen to me. You would feel frustrated, maybe a little bit annoyed by the fact that you weren't able to fully be yourself and express your perspective. That the senior member of the team tells you that you can't participate or express your view because you're not a senior member yourself. So that's the problem, right? Is people using their experience or expertise on a topic to shut other people out. Another strategy that's kind of common is the idea of overwhelming things with proposals. So the idea here is that, yes, it's good to present new ideas, but if you're doing so not with the intention of actually getting those ideas in practice, but instead to flood and overwhelm the system, that's not so great. For instance, maybe you have an idea for a new item to add to the menu. Awesome. But if working for a restaurant, you suddenly start to add like 1 billion different changes and additions and revisions to the menu, and there's no way you're going to cover everything in an hour-long meeting, you're kind of holding things up, right? And not really getting into the content of those proposals. So be careful with adding new things to a meeting or proposing new ideas, right? Using an agenda is a good way to help filter that out. Make sure that the things you're adding to the table are so that can definitely be an issue. So anger for no reason is obviously a problem. So there's a concept in psychology known as fundamental attribution error, right? This is the idea that if somebody is short or seems angry with us, we tend to think that that's their personality, or maybe they're upset with us. We did something. When in reality, that person could just be in a bad mood, having a bad day, right? Maybe you go into a meeting, your alarm didn't go off on time, you got a bad sleep, you couldn't get hot water in the shower going, and your roommates use it all, and you just come in feeling annoyed, right? The trick here is that if that translates into your performance and behavior in the group members are going to feel maybe upset or frustrated or feel like you're mad at them. So one of the challenges is to try to compartmentalize the feelings we might have on other topics versus what we bring into the meeting. Easier said than done, but it's definitely a good practice to try to separate out those things as best you can, or maybe to try to front it and say, hey, everybody, I'm sorry, I got a bad sleep. So I might be a little out of it today. My way or the highway, that is an expression to think about. Another problem of meetings, right? Oftentimes, if we feel like we are giving ultimatums, we say, we've got to make this change, we've got to add this item to the menu, or else we shouldn't even bother or do anything at all, right? That black and white, either or, this or that approach is generally not good teamwork. It doesn't involve working together, developing a solution in a constructive way. So we have to be careful to avoid that way of thinking about problems. When we demand more information than we need, that's another tactic that we can use to stall or hold up or keep a meeting from going well, right? It's one thing to ask for information and to get context. It makes the meeting go well and gives us what we need to make a decision. But when we start demanding an unreasonable amount of information or information that we just don't even need to know to solve the problem, that becomes a really big issue. For instance, telling somebody, okay, well, we know profits are going down over the last by 20% over the past few months. Well, we need the profits over the past 10 years, right? You start asking for a ton of information that could be a really long and difficult process to get. That's demanding more information than you need, and oftentimes holding up the entire group, right? It's stalling. And then lastly, the idea of a circular discussion. A circular discussion means you're stuck on the same topic, you're not getting anywhere, and you're not creating any momentum. Good example of this is an A and B, is B then A, and it just goes forever and ever. So for instance, we should hire this person because this person seems really good. And because they're good, they should be hired. Why are they good? Well, they're good. They seem great, right? That's not a reason to hire the person. That's just you saying that they're good over and over again. So oftentimes in groups, we can be stuck in a rut like that, where we're just saying the exact same things over and over. Sometimes because we think that people aren't listening to us, sometimes because we're not listening to other people and getting the discussion forward, and sometimes because a meeting is not being facilitated well and not giving us the opportunity to just move on. So these are things to think about when it comes to facilitating a meeting forward. As far as facilitating a meeting well, right, and making things go more smoothly, there's a few different things that we can do. Obviously, we want to start on time. Again, if you come in late or you spend like 20 minutes trying to get tech working and you can't get your computer hooked up, that's going to be a big problem that not only affects starting the meeting, but also affects your own credibility background. The idea of starting with something positive is actually a really good way to set the tone for your meeting. If you find yourself in meetings, and as you all shared some of the meetings that you've been in the past, one thing that came up was people feeling like bored or cynical or frustrating or wanting it to end, right? So starting positive is a good way to build momentum and set the tone for the rest of the meeting. For instance, if you're a facilitator, you might start with some good news. You might say, hey, my good friend Greg, who's here in the group, just received word that he's been accepted for a super competitive internship. Hooray for Greg, congratulations. Helps that person feel good, helps the group feel good, and sets things on a good tone for the rest of the meeting. Housekeeping, right? Housekeeping refers to the idea of some of the easier and more menial tasks, the things that aren't that hard to do, that need to get done, just like doing the dishes, running the laundry, all that stuff, right? So housekeeping in this situation could be things such as voting on and talking about and accepting the minutes or the recap from the previous meeting, giving people the chance to share or report on things that happened in the previous meeting. Maybe if there's particular roles or you're trying to figure out time for the next meeting, you do that early on, logistical stuff. So that stuff is good to take on early because if you don't do it at all, and definitely, just like not doing the dishes or the laundry, really start to stack up and be a problem later. Good to get that stuff resolved early. And also an easy way to clear the agenda. You might think about it like a pyramid, right? Where you start with the really easy stuff, and then you kind of funnel out and have more time to discuss the difficult stuff later. Another idea is to define roles and participation among group members really clearly. Again, you might say within the group, okay, this person is in charge of taking notes, and maybe you rotate who takes notes. This person is the parliamentarian who's in charge of enforcing the rules or guidelines for the meeting. This person is in charge of tracking the meeting and making sure it's running on time and giving us reminders about what time we have left. So finding those roles can be useful. If you're doing a meeting remotely, defining things like participation, whether or not you require things like video and that type of thing, right? One thing that I do, and one thing to consider, right, is so for this class, when folks join on Zoom, I don't require video on because even though it can be nice to see faces, oftentimes requiring video can reinforce a lot of disparities, right? People are not necessarily comfortable having themselves or their home or wherever they are broadcast to everybody. So you might want to think about in terms of rules, what requirements you do or don't have on things like this. Keeping your agenda, right? So it's a good idea to have an agenda, have a plan of attack, but you don't want to go off script, right? There's no point in an agenda if during the meeting itself, you go off track and you start going on tangents about unrelated things for the entire meeting. So you do have to bring things back if discussions get less focused. The textbook actually talks about somebody who might be assigned to that role of redirecting. They call it a sheriff, but you can think about it as somebody who just is like a person that circles back, brings it back to the point. You can also have somebody who, as I mentioned before, is tasked with signposting and letting us know how much time is left in the meeting. For instance, we have 1 hour left in our meeting, or we have 10 minutes left. And that can be a really good way to help jog everybody's memory and get people refocused, right? There's a curve that suggests the closer we get to a deadline, the more stuff we get done. Guide instead of dictate. So if you're leading or facilitating, remember that oftentimes making it open for people to, in a participatory or democratic way, discuss and share ideas is a good approach. So there is an acronym that's this NOSTO. Nobody speaks twice until everyone speaks once. It's a good way of thinking about group participation because oftentimes we find ourselves in situations where there's like one or two people in the group who just like dominate the conversation and speak left and right, and nobody else gets to participate or get a word in edgewise. And so if people don't get to participate or feel like their voice matters or they get heard, they're going to tune out. So, giving the chance for people who haven't spoken to join the conversation is one strategy that works. Another strategy is you might be familiar with like the talking stick or like a ball that gets thrown around the room. If you've seen shows like The Office, they kind of make jokes about this, but it's the idea that you can only talk or speak within the group if you're holding the ball or the stick. So that's one model that sometimes gets used. Another model is called stacking, where people can raise their hands, get added to a list, and then be the person on the docket to speak. Or if you kind of have a lowered hand, then that means that you want to reply to somebody that's currently speaking. And that can be a good model if it feels like people are talking over each other too much. And then lastly, another idea here is the idea of a perception check. So as we've talked about, a really big portion of the communication we do is nonverbal. It's things like our gestures, our tone of voice, our physicality, and so on. When we're in meetings, especially meetings that are happening remotely, those nonverbal cues are a lot harder. People might not have video on. People are in this like little two-dimensional space and so on. And we can also think about the ways that things like culture mean that certain nonverbal signals don't translate as well in the same way. A perception check is a way to check in about somebody nonverbally. I could tell from your tone that it seemed like you were being sarcastic. Did you mean this comment sincerely? Sounds a little bit weird, right? A little bit confrontational, but it is a good way to check that person's nonverbal communication and just make sure that what you think their message is what they intended to say. A few other things that I think could be a really good way to create group facilitation that goes well. Again, assigning and capturing action items. A really good way to do this is if you're in a larger group, saying, okay, we're going to have two teams. This team is going to tackle this item. This team is going to tackle this item. We'll meet again in 20 minutes, right? Breaking things into smaller groups like that helps. Making things fun or making things healthy is a really cool thing. So my advisor, who helped get me through grad school, was awesome. One thing that she did that was the cutest thing was when we went into a meeting, she got us these little magnets that had these like silly like science or chemistry jokes on them. And so she started things really fun. It was like, here's a magnet, here's a magnet. And it was a really enjoyable way to start a meeting. Avoiding sarcasm and cynicism for a lot of reasons. And one of the biggest reasons is that people might take you seriously, or cynicism can make the overall mood and productivity of a meeting go way down. It's okay to crack jokes and, make fun of stuff every now and then, but letting that dominate the group can not go well. Quick wins, as we've talked about, are a really great way to make your group dynamics go well. Quick win is an easy item you can really resolve and figure out quickly. So again, kind of doing that pyramid method where you start with really easy tasks is great. Think back to inertia. Objects in motion stay in motion, objects at rest stay at rest. Same way, we start to build momentum, we start to work through tasks. We not only create the opportunity for people to work together on other issues because they have more time, we've gotten good stuff out of the way, but people get the chance to talk to each other, to build relationships, to build synergy in such a way that the harder tasks are now ones that are happening with that pre-established trust. Breaks, right? Especially if you're in a long meeting, breaks are crucial. You might think that if you're in a big group that you don't need to take breaks because you're only meeting for an hour and a half, but like that hour and a half is really going to drag and be a rough experience. You might think it costs more time to take a break, but it actually helps because people come in more refreshed and revved up and aren't freaked out about needing to use the restroom or needing to get water or needing to get a snack. Showing respect, of course, is really important. Being respectful and supportive to each other definitely matters a lot in your groups. Expecting unexpected things. So being prepared and knowing what to do in the case of a crisis or challenge that comes up is important. You know, the fire alarm could go off in the middle of your meeting and you could find yourself having to deal with that. Or, you know, almost all of our first week of class could have been canceled due to snow. So it's important for us to be able to adapt. Assessment, right, is a way of checking in, being like, how are things going in the group? How's everybody doing? One method you can do if you're a group leader, and something I've done a couple of times, is to kind of hover, right, or move between the different groups to see how things are going. And then thinking and talking ahead. Again, planning for the next meeting is a really good way to do some of these strategies. So the other thing that I want to talk about before we get into today's prompt is to think a little bit about virtual facilitation, right? So it's a necessary evil. We were doing meetings through Zoom, doing meetings remotely before COVID. Now, hopefully with cases going down, things getting better, we're probably going to have a lot more situations where people meet face-to-face. But I think it's fair to say that the impact of meetings being moved remotely is probably going to stick around for a while. In fact, there's a lot of meetings that are now just going to continue to happen remotely, even if people could meet face-to-face or COVID wasn't a thing. Or a lot more jobs are now being offered totally remote. So there's more situations in which we have to do virtual meetings, even though we don't always enjoy it, right? So there's a few things we can do to make these go a little bit more smoothly. One idea is to get everybody to say something. So one really good strategy is at the beginning of a meeting to have everybody go around and just say a quick thing. So for instance, hey, tell us who you are, tell us something that you did over the weekend. And yeah, it's good as an icebreaker, but it's also good to make sure that everybody's audio is working and everybody is participating and active in the meeting and not just idling, right? So this is a good strategy to use because you don't want to find out like an hour in that somebody's mic is broken and that they've been trying to talk to you but haven't, right? An early check-in like that just makes sure that everybody can talk. Reminding people of the purpose and outcomes of the meeting is really important. One variable in having meetings virtually is the idea that people are going to drift in and out of meetings, right? Or people are going to have tabs open, there's more distractions, more opportunities to multitask. So bringing people back when you can, reminding people of the meetings and so on is really important. And there's also this point where like Zoom meetings, FaceTime meetings, Google Hangouts, and so on start to blur together. You just kind of jump on a meeting without remembering what it's about. It's good to remind people. Ask for insight from people that haven't been participating, right? So the tactic of cold calling, right, where you call a person's name and ask them to join the group or to add to a discussion is a really good strategy. If you feel like there are people that haven't been able to participate much. Again, because people are drifting in and out, having people summarize the status of the meeting, what's happening in the meeting, is a really good way to get people engaged. Again, remind people what's been going on. Discourage calling in other words, if people are not able to get on with a phone in a way that has a secure connection or works well, don't force them to join the meeting. One thing I'm a big proponent of, right, is not to force people to do meetings if they are not able to do so safely. So if you're like driving and pouring down rain and super heavy traffic, or you're going up the pass between LeGrand and Pendleton, right? You don't need to call in for a meeting. You might wait until it's safer to do so. Using clarification to help with cues that are missing is really important. For instance, if somebody says something that bothers you, right, there's a good chance you'll like furrow your brow or roll your eyes or do some type of nonverbal response, right? But if you're on Zoom and maybe you don't have your video on, or even if you do, and it's just a small box that not everybody is looking at the time, you might not convey that in the same way. So you might say verbally, hey, I was really frustrated by that comment. Can we talk about it? So that's a way to make sure you're clarifying those missing nonverbal cues. And then lastly, letting people know if you need to leave. Using things like the chat or other features to tell people you're not able to make it or you have to get out early or something like that is a big help. A couple other things that I'd recommend that aren't discussed in the textbook but that I found are really good resources to use when you're doing virtual meetings. If you're facilitating or hosting, use the chat or regularly check the chat. Again, it is, and I say this with all the love in the world to my colleagues, it is baffling that we're in 2022 and there's like a concerning number of professors that don't know how to use the chat. The chat is a great way to make sure that people are able to communicate. If somebody's audio or mic or whatever isn't working, right, they can jump into the chat and share that. And you can also use the chat to do things like post links and information that people can access. So the chat is really useful. Also recording, right? Recording a meeting and having that uploaded later is great, including for people that can't attend or people who just want to go back and track a certain part of the meeting. So definitely recommend using some of those features too to help out and just make sure that everything works well and goes smoothly with your meetings. Again, some of you might already be doing these things or already needing to have meetings like this one. Some of you might not yet be doing meetings like this or need to facilitate meetings. So hopefully these are skills that in the future you end up finding useful. So what I want to do now with some of the remaining time that we have is I have a scenario for you. So you get to choose a club or activity. It could be one that you're a part of or have been a part of. It could be a totally new thing. But I want you to think about a club or activity at EOU. And first of all, I want you to think about some bad habits of group meeting facilitation that we've talked about. And what you could do to prevent those from happening in this club or group. Secondarily, I want you to think about what it means to do good facilitation. And based on what we've talked about so far, how you could facilitate a good meeting. And then lastly, if this is a virtual meeting, what would you do to make things work in the virtual space? So again, take some time to think about a club or activity that you could facilitate and start to work through and think about what holding good group facilitation would look like. So I'll give you about 7 or 8 minutes to work through and think through this part of the prompt for your attendance. So take another minute or so to finish up here on this prompt. Go ahead and finish the current thought or idea that you're working on. So this was just kind of an opportunity for us to think about, again, the ways that we get to use group participation and facilitation effectively. Again, we might not all be running a group right now, but I think these are strategies that help us make participating in a group worthwhile. So just as a quick recap, we talked a little bit about how we can facilitate and work together in groups, creating a good environment through things like facilitation, and then a range of challenges and issues that can definitely impact our ability to work effectively. Next class, we'll talk a little bit about structuring and organizing meetings effectively. We'll try to make it kind of fun, but it'll be a way for us to use some of these ideas that we've talked about so far to make a meeting run smoothly. So go ahead and email or pass forward your prompts for today. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and I look forward to seeing you again for Friday's class.